Stillness within the Cascade. Master Dao stretched his weary legs as he sat on a flat rock overlooking the mountain valley. Far below him, a waterfall spilled over lichen-strewn cliffs, cold white water crashing down into swirling pools before continuing on as a meandering stream. Mist rose in billowing clouds from the cascade, carried upward on the breeze. The monk drew back the wide sleeves of his simple robe and held his palms open to receive the tingling spray. He closed his eyes, feeling the sensations envelop him. The roar of the falling water filled his ears, the ancient wisdom of the stones filtered through his veins. For a moment, Dao's individual being merged fully into the surrounding landscape. He became part of the living mountain. When he opened his eyes again, Master Dao's gaze was clear and penetrating. Another season's pilgrimage was nearing its end. Soon he would depart this remote hermitage and make the long trek back to the monastery. But first he had come to meditate by the singing cascade once more, as he had done for decades. In his youth, Dao had lived as one of many monks at the ancient temple. He had embraced the communal rituals and rigorous duties under their wise abbot, working each day in mindful service. But as he walked deeper along the eightfold path, Dao felt drawn toward a life of solitary contemplation in nature, and so the abbot had given Dao permission to follow his calling into the stillness. To dwell apart in some secluded refuge where he could devote himself fully to meditation and inward focus. Nowhere had seemed more fitting to Dao than this rocky outcropping above the waterfall, and so here he had remained for long seasons, returning to the monastery only when the harsh mountain winter descended each year. By morning, Dao would make the weeks-long trek back down the winding cliffside trail. But for now, he sat in lotus position on his stone perch and fell into deep meditation as the endless cascading waters purified his soul. The swirling eddies reflected the motions of the universe itself, incessant change within underlying harmony. Years ago, during his very first stay at the hermitage above the falls, Dao had come to appreciate the metaphor in those churning waters. Early on, he had struggled greatly in his meditation. His mind always jumped and darted like a monkey from thought to thought, never still for long. Back then Dao had viewed his own thoughts as interruptions and obstacles. He did not yet understand thoughts were also part of the natural flow. But in time, after returning to sit by the singing cascade year after year, Dao gained insight. Just as rocks and branches sailed along in the swirling pools, caught in the greater current, so too did thoughts arise and pass through the mind. The key was not to cling to passing thoughts any more than the waterfall clung possessively to each fleck of foam. Dao learned to observe his thoughts with equanimity as they bubbled upward, crested, and dissolved. They became small waves in the vast ocean. Now Dao's meditations glided along as smoothly as the stream flowing out from the cascade's base. He abided in deep calm, experiencing each moment with clarity. His rebelling ego-self had long since been dissolved, integrated into visceral union with all existence. As he sat in lotus pose enveloped by mist, Dao's half-closed eyes observed a pair of yellow mountain finches sweeping swiftly around the waterfall on synchronized wing beats. Their delicate forms rode the swirling updrafts and crosswinds caused by the cascade. The monks watched their spiraling flight with admiration. The finch's dance of delicate poise amidst powerful currents reminded Dao of how he navigated his own ever-changing mental landscape. Through years of devotion the monk had learned to harness the winds of his consciousness without fighting against nature's flow. The bird's flight and the waterfall offered as pure a demonstration of mindfulness as any sutras. Dao opened his eyes fully again and blinked away the beads of moisture that had collected on his wrinkled eyelids. He unfolded his legs, allowing circulation to return with a series of tingles and prickles. Mindful as always of the aches in his aging joints, the monk stretched slowly before rising to his feet. He took up the staff resting against the rocks and shuffled carefully along the narrow trail leading back from the valley overlook. Though the days of vigorous hikes up precarious cliffs had passed, Dao was sure-footed enough along this familiar path. His sandaled feet found each stable foothold from decades of memory. Within the sparse stone walls of his tiny hut, Dao stoked the embers of last night's fire. He set water to boiling and measured out dried leaves for one final batch of nourishing tea before his return to the monastery. As he waited for the tea to steep, Tao stood tranquil in the doorway, gazing out at silvery ribbons of water cascading down. Their incessant splashing sang a primal melody older than any temple bells. Finally Tao withdrew the steaming tea and shuffled back outside to sip it slowly. The sun was a fading glow behind mist-veiled peaks. Night would soon enshroud the hermitage. Tao settled onto his straw mat as darkness grew, moonbeams flickering through cracks in the stone. Sleep gradually descended, merging seamlessly into meditative rest. At sunrise Tao arose and packed his sparse belongings for the trek back to rejoin his brothers. His awareness drank in the details all around him, birds fluttering from trees, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots, the heft of his knotted pack across his shoulders. Each step of the pilgrimage would be a meditation in presence. As Tao passed the overlook above the singing cascade, he paused one last time to absorb the majesty reflected in its foam and spray. The swirling waters called to him across the years. They would continue flowing long after he was gone. But their eternal song was also his own. Tao bowed in humble reverence. Then with step steady as always, he continued down the winding mountain path. Forests, cliffs and streams blurred past in procession. Tao's mind remained still within the cascade.